Maple Hollow was a town of comfort and calm, framed by thick woods on one side and the gentle flow of the Willow River on the other. Nothing much ever happened here, and that was just the way its residents liked it. So, when the Carnival of Shadows rolled into town one crisp autumn afternoon, it felt like the entire world had shifted slightly on its axis. Rumors about the Carnival of Shadows were whispered in hushed tones in the towns it had previously visited. Stories of bizarre occurrences, inexplicable phenomena, and the enigmatic acts that left audiences both terrified and mesmerized long after the carnival tents were packed away. The most talked about was Whisper the Clown, a character so unsettling that his performances were often blamed for the string of sleepless nights that followed the carnival's departure. Jake, a 17-year-old high school student, was immediately intrigued when he saw the faded, vintage posters stapled to the telephone poles along Main Street. The posters featured an image of a clown, his face painted in stark white with exaggerated black eyes and a red, too-wide smile. Underneath, in bold, Gothic letters, it read, "See Whisper the Clown at the Carnival of Shadows. One night only." "Guys, we have to check this out," Jake said to his friends, Mia and Tyler, as they gathered around the local diner's pinboard that also sported a poster. Mia, always up for anything that could potentially add excitement to their mundane routines, agreed immediately. "It's just before Halloween. What better way to get into the spooky spirit?" she said, her eyes twinkling with a mix of curiosity and thrill. Tyler, more skeptical and cautious, frowned slightly. "I've heard weird things about this carnival. They say it's cursed or something. People go in and they come out. Different." "Oh, come on, Ty. It's all part of the act. It's meant to spook you." "It's what they do," Jake argued, clapping Tyler on the back. The decision was made, and the trio planned to visit the carnival that evening. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the air in Maple Hollow grew crisp and cold, carrying a faint, unsettling laughter that seemed to come from the direction of the carnival. Upon arriving, they found the carnival set up on the old fairgrounds, a sprawling space at the edge of town that hadn't been used in years. The scene was like stepping into another world. Dimly lit paper lanterns hung from sagging strings, casting eerie shadows and illuminating the faces of excited and slightly nervous visitors. The scent of popcorn and candy apples mixed with a less pleasant smell of damp and decay. Old-time carnival music played from somewhere deep within, its melody distorted and haunting. Jake led the way with an excited bounce in his step, Mia's enthusiasm matching his, while Tyler trailed behind, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, eyes darting around nervously. Their first stop was at the ticket booth, where an old man with a face as crinkled as the faded ticket stubs he handed out greeted them. "Enjoy the show, and beware of Whisper," he said, his voice a raspy whisper that sent a shiver down Tyler's spine. As they moved through the grounds, the trio took in the sights of the various acts and games. There were fire-eaters, sword-swallowers, and contortionists, each performing under their own little tents adorned with peeling paint and flickering lights. But it was the main tent that drew their attention, its large, black canvas decorated with silver stars and moons. It stood ominously at the far end of the carnival, beckoning visitors to enter. "Let's check out some of the other stuff before the show starts," Mia suggested, her eyes wide with excitement as she pointed towards a game booth where darts flew through the air, popping balloons for prizes. Jake and Tyler agreed, and for a short while they lost themselves in the simple joy of the games, winning a few stuffed toys and sharing a bucket of caramel popcorn. But as the night darkened, the air grew colder, and the time for Whisper the Clown's performance drew near. They couldn't ignore the pull of the main tent any longer. The friends, now slightly jittery from both the cold and the carnival's chilling atmosphere, made their way towards the tent. A sign posted outside read, "Enter if you dare," in looping, sinister script. Taking a deep breath and exchanging uncertain looks, they stepped forward, the flap of the tent closing behind them with a soft, ominous thud. Inside, the real nightmare awaited. Inside the main tent, the atmosphere shifted palpably. The dimly lit interior was wrapped in thick velvet drapes of deep burgundy, which absorbed the light and muffled the sound, creating a cocoon that felt worlds away from the festive chaos outside. A single spotlight shone in the center of the ring, casting a large, stark circle of light on the sawdust-covered ground. The rest of the tent was shrouded in shadows, with the audience sitting on creaky wooden benches that formed a semicircle around the center stage. Mia, Jake, and Tyler found seats near the front, their hearts pounding in anticipation. The crowd around them was a mixture of nervous excitement and palpable fear. Children clung to their parents, and couples held hands tightly. The air was thick with the scent of mold mixed with the tang of iron, and the low murmur of the audience created a buzzing undercurrent of anxiety. Suddenly, the lights dimmed further, and a hush fell over the crowd. A soft, haunting melody began to play, a music box tune that seemed both sweet and sinister. From the darkness beyond the spotlight, a figure emerged, Whisper the Clown. He moved with an eerie grace, his feet barely touching the ground as he glided into the light. Whisper was tall and gaunt, dressed in a tattered suit of black and red stripes, his costume frayed at the edges and stained with what looked unsettlingly like old, dark splatters. His face was painted stark white, with deep black hollows around his eyes that seemed to suck in the light, and a twisted crimson smile that stretched too wide across his face. His hair was a matted tuft of black that stuck out at odd angles, and as he moved into the spotlight, he tilted his head to one side, as if inspecting the crowd, deciding whom to entertain or terrify. Without a word, Whisper began his performance. He pulled from his sleeves an array of objects that transformed before the audience's eyes, doves that turned into rats, flowers that wilted into dust as he laughed a low, guttural chuckle. But it was his eyes that held the crowd. They were pits of darkness that seemed to flicker with a cold light, pulling the audience deeper into his spell. As he performed, Whisper would occasionally stop and fix his gaze on a member of the audience. Each time he did, the chosen person would squirm under his stare, as if feeling an icy touch against their spine. Jake felt a chill every time Whisper's gaze swept over their row, and even the usually fearless Mia gripped his arm tightly. Suddenly, the clown stopped. His gaze fixed on Tyler, who until now had been shrinking further into his seat. Whisper extended a hand, beckoning Tyler to come forward. Tyler's eyes widened in terror, but it was as if a force beyond his control compelled him to stand. Silently, he walked towards the center of the ring, his steps hesitant but inexorable. Whisper greeted Tyler with a bow, his head tilting unnaturally low. He then whispered something into Tyler's ear, too low for anyone else to hear. Tyler nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and then the clown took a step back, clapping his hands with a flourish that seemed to break the spell holding the audience. For his next trick, Whisper produced a small, ornate box from within his coat. Opening it, he revealed it to be empty, or so it seemed. With a grand gesture, he invited Tyler to look inside. As Tyler peered into the darkness of the box, his expression shifted from fear to confusion, and then to sheer terror. He stumbled back, shaking his head, refusing to share what he saw. Whisper's laugh, low and menacing, filled the tent as he closed the box with a snap and, with another bow, dismissed Tyler, who rushed back to his seat, pale and shaken. The performance ended soon after, with Whisper taking a final, sweeping bow as the lights brightened. The audience, released from the spell, quickly began to file out, murmuring about what they had witnessed. Mia and Jake gathered close to Tyler, bombarding him with questions, but he remained silent, his eyes haunted and distant. As they left the tent, the cold air outside seemed almost warm compared to the chill of Whisper's realm. They walked in silence back towards the carnival gates, each lost in their own thoughts, the echoes of Whisper's laughter following them like a shadow. After leaving the main tent, the trio felt the oppressive weight of the night pressing in on them. The carnival, once a buzzing hub of laughter and screams of delight, now seemed to harbor shadows that moved with sinister intent. Tyler, usually the most composed of the group, kept glancing over his shoulder, his eyes wide and darting into the dark corners around them. "Tyler, what did Whisper tell you? What was in the box?" Mia asked, her voice filled with concern and a hint of fear as they made their way towards the midway, which was now almost deserted. Tyler shook his head, his lips pressed tightly together. "I can't. I don't want to talk about it." "Not yet," he muttered, more to himself than in response. The lightness of their earlier adventure had evaporated, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to thicken with the fog rolling in from the fields. Jake, trying to lighten the mood, suggested they play a few more games before heading home. "Come on, it might take our minds off things for a bit," he said with a forced smile. Reluctantly, Mia and Tyler agreed, and they approached a booth where wooden milk bottles were stacked in a pyramid. The objective was simple: knock them down with bean bags to win a prize. As they took turns throwing, the sound of the bean bags thudding against the wood was strangely comforting, a normal sound in an evening that had become anything but. However, the normalcy was short-lived. As Jake tossed another bean bag, a gust of wind swept through the midway, carrying with it a whisper that was too familiar, the low, menacing chuckle of Whisper the Clown. The laughter seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere, enveloping them in a cold embrace. "Did you guys hear that?" Mia asked, her eyes searching the shadows. "Yeah, I heard it. Let's get out of here." "This place is messed up," Tyler replied, his earlier shock morphing into a resolute urgency. They hurried towards the exit, but the layout of the carnival seemed to have subtly shifted. Paths that once led directly to the gates now twisted back on themselves, leading them in frustrating circles. The laughter continued, a constant presence that seemed to mock their efforts to leave. Realizing they were lost, Jake spotted a large tent that wasn't there before, an old marquee with flaps partially open, inviting yet foreboding. "Look, maybe we can cut through there, get to the other side quicker," he suggested, pointing towards it. With no better plan, they approached the tent, the fabric of which rippled as if breathing in the wind. They slipped inside, and the interior was pitch black, the only light provided by their phones' flashlights, slicing through the darkness like blades. Inside, they found themselves in another maze, this one made of mirrors. As they walked, their reflections twisted and turned, growing and shrinking in disturbing, unnatural ways. The laughter grew louder, bouncing off the glass, making it impossible to pinpoint its source. "Keep close, don't lose each other," Mia said, grabbing Tyler's hand. Jake led the way, trying to maintain a sense of direction. As they turned a corner, Tyler's flashlight beam landed on a mirror that didn't reflect their images. Instead, it showed a swirling, dark mist. As they watched, faces appeared in the mist, ghastly, tormented visages that screamed silently before dissolving back into the darkness. Mia screamed, pulling back, and in the panic, Tyler was separated from them. Jake and Mia found themselves ejected from the maze suddenly, stumbling out into the cool night air. They were back near the main entrance, but Tyler was nowhere to be seen. "Tyler!" Mia called out, her voice shaky with tears. "We have to go back. We have to find him." Jake nodded, gripping her hand tightly. "We will. We're going to find him and get out of here together. This ends tonight." Determined, they turned back to face the carnival, its lights flickering as if in warning. The laughter was now a distant echo, but the threat it posed was more real than ever. They stepped forward, ready to confront whatever horrors lay ahead to rescue their friend and end the nightmare that had ensnared them. Jake and Mia, their hearts pounding in their chests, raced back into the maze of mirrors, determined to find Tyler and escape the sinister carnival. The echoes of Whisper's laughter still reverberated around them, chilling their bones with each haunting cackle. The air was thick with an ominous mist, clouding their vision and muffling their voices as they called out for their friend. "Tyler, can you hear us?" Mia shouted, her voice echoing off the mirrors. There was no response, only the distorted reflections staring back at them, their features twisted in silent screams. Jake led the way, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, revealing path after winding path in the labyrinthine tent. As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, and the mist seemed to swirl with intent, enveloping them in a tight embrace. Suddenly, Mia's flashlight flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Panic rose in her throat. "Jake, I think." Before she could finish, a dim light appeared ahead. It was Tyler's phone, lying on the ground next to a mirror. The screen was cracked, its light flickering weakly. Jake picked it up, his hands trembling. "He has to be close," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. They continued their search, guided now by just one beam of light. As they rounded another corner, they stumbled upon a part of the maze they hadn't encountered before. Here, the mirrors didn't reflect their images at all. Instead, they were opaque, like windows looking into other, darker realms. Shadows moved just beyond the glass, forms that were human-like but grotesquely distorted. Mia gasped as she saw a shadow that resembled Tyler. He was reaching out towards them, his mouth open as if screaming, but no sound came through. Jake touched the glass, his hand shaking. "We're going to get you out of there," he promised, though he had no idea how. Suddenly, the entire tent shook as if caught in a gust of wind, and the oppressive atmosphere intensified. Whisper's voice, closer now, filled the space around them. "Why leave so soon?" he taunted. "The fun has just begun." With a surge of adrenaline and fear, Jake slammed his fist into the mirror. It shattered, the fragments falling away like shards of ice. Behind it, they found an opening, a tear in the fabric of the tent that led back into the real world. Tyler was there, slumped against the side, but alive. Mia rushed to him, helping him to his feet. His eyes were wide with terror, and he clutched at them as they helped him through the opening. "I thought I'd never see you again," he whispered hoarsely. Outside, the carnival was silent, the laughter and music gone as if they had never existed. The trio didn't stop to look back. They just ran, not stopping until they reached the safety of their homes. The next morning, the Carnival of Shadows was gone. The field where it had stood empty except for trampled grass and a few stray pieces of litter blowing in the wind. The town of Maple Hollow slowly returned to its usual rhythm, the residents speaking of the carnival in hushed, fearful tones, wondering if it had been real or a collective nightmare. Jake, Mia, and Tyler, however, knew the truth. They met often, talking about what had happened, trying to make sense of it. Tyler never did say what Whisper had whispered to him, or what he had seen in the dark box. Some secrets, they agreed, were too dark to be shared, even among friends. As life returned to normal, the memories of that night began to fade, but the echoes of Whisper's laughter sometimes danced on the edge of their thoughts, a chilling reminder of the night they had stared into the abyss and the abyss had stared back. They were marked by their experience, bound by it, and though they hoped never to encounter the Carnival of Shadows again, in their hearts they knew that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed.